somewhere on this earth, far from cities, roads, or light, lies a forest older than memory, the Amazon. A place where the sun filters through a million green leaves like broken glass, where the air is thick with silence and the trees whisper stories no human was ever meant to hear. But our story doesn't begin there. It begins far above it, in the sky. It begins with a sound, a sharp crack, like the tearing of the world itself, and then a fall. From 10,000 feet above the earth, one seat separated from a disintegrating plane, and in that seat, a girl, 17 years old, wearing a simple white dress, holding on to nothing but the straps across her chest. She is falling, through clouds, through a thunderstorm, through time, and yet she will live. This is not fiction. This is not fantasy. This is the real story of Juliane Koepke, the girl who fell from the sky and survived. But before we tell of her fall, we must first return to her beginning, to the quiet forests of Peru, to the parents who raised her, and to the strange, beautiful life that prepared her to face death and walk away. So close your eyes. Let the noise of the day fade into the trees. Let your breathing slow, and listen. You are now listening to Sleeping Radio, where the stories begin only when the world has gone to sleep. Juliane Margaret Koepke was born on October 10th, 1954, in Lima, the capital of Peru. But Lima was never really home. Her story was written from the beginning between two worlds, one of science and books, and one of wild, untamed nature. Her father, Dr. Hans Wilhelm Köpske, was a German zoologist, quiet, thoughtful, a man who believed that understanding nature meant living in it. Her mother, Maria Koepke, was a renowned ornithologist, a bird specialist, sharp-eyed, deeply intuitive, and passionate about the creatures that filled the trees and skies of South America. They were scientists, but not the kind that lived in city labs or classrooms. No, the Koepkes had chosen the forest. And soon, so would Juliane. In the early 1960s, when Juliane was just a child, her family left Lima behind and moved deep into the heart of the Peruvian jungle. There, in the middle of nothing but trees and river banks, they built a simple research station. Panguana. Imagine it. No roads, no cars, no schools. Just a wooden hut, miles from the nearest village, surrounded by towering trees, screaming monkeys, snakes slithering through the grass, and birds singing in 1,000 languages. While other children in Lima learned math from chalkboards, Juliane learned it from nature. She didn't grow up afraid of the jungle. She grew up inside it. She could tell the call of a toucan from that of a parrot before she was 10. She learned how to follow the flow of rivers, how to read the sun through the canopy, how to know which mushrooms were poisonous, and which leaves could stop bleeding. She had seen jaguars. She had heard howler monkeys at midnight. She had watched storms roll across the forest from miles away, and knew what the stillness before lightning truly felt like. Nature wasn't a mystery to her. It was her home. But jungle life was not always easy. There were mosquitoes, thick swarms of them that bit through clothes. There were spiders the size of a hand, venomous snakes hidden in fallen leaves, and the constant, pulsing presence of heat and humidity that never quite let up. Yet Julianne didn't complain. Even when it was hard, she felt a deep, almost unexplainable bond with the wild, and that bond would become everything. Still, she was not a wild child, not entirely. Her mother insisted she complete her schooling properly, and so, when she was 14, Julianne was sent back to Lima to finish her education. She hated it at first. The crowded hallways, the buzzing city noise, the artificial lights. It was the opposite of the world she knew. But she adjusted. Her mind was quick, her German discipline strong. She missed the forest terribly, but she carried it within her, in memories, in instincts, in the rhythm of her breath. By the time she turned 17, Julianne was preparing to graduate from her school in Lima. She had dreams, vague ones, still forming. Maybe she'd become a scientist like her parents. Maybe she'd return to Panguana and help continue their research. All she knew for sure was that her life was meant to stay connected to the natural world. And then came the flight. It was December 1971, just before Christmas. Her school had ended. She was ready for a break, a time to return home to Panguana with her mother. Her father had gone ahead earlier to prepare the research station, and now Julianne and Maria would fly together to meet him. The airline, LANSA, Líneas Aéreas Nacionales S.A., a domestic Peruvian carrier known for cheap flights and poor safety records. On the morning of December 24th, Julianne and her mother arrived at the airport in Lima. Their flight had been delayed multiple times due to weather. The skies over the Amazon basin were dark and heavy. A storm was coming. Other passengers were nervous. Some canceled. But Julianne and her mother boarded. It was only a 1-hour flight. They'd done it before. What could go wrong? The plane took off. Julianne sat by the window, her mother beside her. Around them, the plane was full. 91 people in total. Families, students, travelers, workers heading home for the holidays. The aircraft, a Lockheed L-188 Electra, rumbled through the clouds as it turned east, leaving the coast and heading inland. Beneath them, the jungle stretched like an endless green ocean. Julianne felt a little uneasy. There was turbulence, dark clouds outside. Lightning flashed somewhere in the distance. The plane jolted once, then again. The passengers shifted in their seats. A baby cried. Over the intercom, the flight attendants told everyone to remain calm. And then, the sky exploded. It happened in a second. A blinding light, a violent crack of thunder, and then chaos. The cabin ripped apart. People screamed. The walls of the plane tore away. Luggage flew. Seats separated. Wind roared through the fuselage, and Julianne, still strapped to her seat, was sucked into the sky. She was falling, still alive, still conscious. Falling through a thunderstorm, thousands of feet above the earth. She is falling, strapped to a row of 3 airplane seats, twisting, tumbling, a pinwheel spinning through the sky. The thunderstorm around her is still raging. Rain slashes her face. Wind punches her chest. She can't scream. She can't breathe. The air is too thin. The air is too thin. Her eyes are open, but she sees nothing but flashes of light and green far, far below. Julianne doesn't remember the moment the plane exploded. Only the sensation of being ripped out into the sky. No warning, no goodbye. Just silence and a pressure in her ears, and then falling. She doesn't pass out. Somehow she stays awake. Through the fall, through the roar of the storm, through the chaos, she is there, inside her body, aware. But the world is moving too fast. Time is breaking into pieces. And then something else happens. The wind becomes slower, softer. The roar of the storm becomes a hum. The seat she's strapped to begins to level, slightly, as it drifts sideways. Somewhere, hidden beneath the thick ceiling of the rainforest, is the ground. But above it, a green cathedral of leaves, branches, vines, millions of layers deep. And that canopy, it catches her. Instead of crashing hard into earth and bone, Julianne's fall is broken by the thickest, densest part of the jungle. The trees. First, branches. Dozens of them. They whip her legs, slice her arms, tangle in her hair. Leaves and vines wrap around her. And then, impact, a thud. Not hard enough to kill her, not soft enough to keep her conscious. She blacks out, and for hours, maybe longer, the forest holds her, not as an intruder, not as prey, but as something else, something quiet, something barely alive. When Julianne opens her eyes again, the storm has passed. The sky is pale, the light is gray, and all around her there is nothing but jungle, a wall of green in every direction. No wreckage, no smoke, no voices. Only the clicking of insects, the rustle of leaves, and the overwhelming sensation that she is alone. She is still strapped to her seat. Somehow her body had landed upright. Her right collarbone is broken. She feels the sharp pain as she breathes. One of her eyes is swollen shut. Her glasses, gone. Her left shoe, gone. Her dress is torn, dirty, soaked with rain and blood. And yet she is alive. The girl who fell from the sky has survived. At first she can't even process it. The shock is too great. She calls out, softly, then louder. Mom! Silence. She calls again, over and over. Mom! Nothing answers. There are no human voices, no footsteps, No signs of the plain, just trees, just vines, just heat. She is 17, half blind, dizzy, in pain, and alone in one of the most unforgiving environments on earth. But Julianne doesn't panic. She doesn't cry. Somewhere deep inside her, maybe because of her childhood in the jungle, maybe because of instinct, she knows what to do. She waits. She breathes. She listens. The forest is not just chaos. It has rhythms. And she, somehow, knows that if she panics now, it will swallow her. She slowly unbuckles herself from the seat. Stands. Her legs are weak. Her body trembles. She leans against a tree for balance. No food, no water, no shoes, no map, no knife, no signal. But she is not entirely lost. Not yet. She knows one thing. Her father always told her. If you ever get lost in the jungle, follow water. Small trickles lead to streams. Streams lead to rivers. And rivers lead to people. That memory, that tiny truth, becomes her compass. She looks around, and then, step by slow, painful step, she begins to walk. The forest is not empty. It may look still to someone unfamiliar, but Julianne knows better. Every inch of this place is alive. Beneath the ferns, behind the leaves, above the branches, inside the mud. The Amazon breathes. It listens. It waits. It watches. She is not the only living thing here, but she is the most fragile. Julianne walks slowly, her broken collarbone aching with every movement. Her right eye remains swollen. Her bare foot sinks into the wet floor of the jungle. Her other foot, still with a single sandal, limps unevenly. She moves forward because she has no choice, and because, in some strange way, she was prepared for this. Not fully, not confidently, but better than most. Her childhood memories begin to rise to the surface now. Small fragments of advice and knowledge, once taken for granted, now burned into survival. She remembers what her father taught her. Stay close to water. Don't eat anything you don't recognize. Most snakes won't strike unless startled. Listen to the birds. When they stop singing, something is near. Hazy fragments become her compass, her shield, her only guide. She scans the ground for signs of movement. Insects crawl across her ankles. A lizard skitters away. She hears the flap of wings somewhere above, but the canopy is too thick to see the sky. The sun is hidden and time is meaningless. There are no clocks here. No night or day in the way we understand it. Only the rising and falling of light between branches. She does not know how long she walks, maybe an hour, maybe 3, but eventually she hears something new. The sound of water. Not loud, not fast, but there. A quiet gurgle, like a whisper between rocks. She pushes toward it. Through ferns, around tree trunks, She nearly stumbles down a small slope, and then she sees it. A shallow stream, maybe knee-deep, winding through the undergrowth like a silver thread. It's barely moving. The water is murky, but clear enough to reflect flashes of green. She kneels beside it and drinks, cupping her hand. The water tastes of earth and leaves, but it's cool and alive. It fills her mouth and calms her trembling chest. She washes her face, tries to clear her swollen eye. Her skin stings where branches have cut her. Her arms and legs are covered in bruises. Her shoulder is still burning with pain. But she is alive. That has to count for something. She decides to follow the stream. The water is slow and it doesn't lead anywhere obvious. It disappears around bends and under roots. But she remembers her father's words. All water leads to more water. And more water may mean help. As she walks along the stream, 1,000 eyes watch her. Monkeys above, birds on branches, insects that rise in clouds from the brush, frogs with bright colors that warn of poison, snakes she cannot see, but knows are there. The jungle does not comfort her, but it does not attack either. It simply continues, breathing, watching, testing her. Sometimes she sees flashes of movement, the flick of a tail, a ripple in the water, the sudden silence of birds. But nothing draws close. Julianne speaks to herself, not in panic, but in rhythm. Short phrases, whispers. Keep going. Just a little more. Find the river. Dad said, follow the stream. Her voice becomes a heartbeat, her breath in the silence. It's not to scare animals. It's to stay connected, to remind herself that she's still here, still moving, still Julianne, as night begins to fall. If it can be called night, the green fades into black. Darkness in the jungle is complete. There are no stars, no moonlight. The trees block out everything. Julianne cannot see more than her own hand in front of her face. She finds a small clearing near the water and crouches there. She does not lie down fully. She cannot. The ground is crawling, wet, uneven. She wraps her arms around herself, shivering. Mosquitoes swarm her skin. She slaps them weakly. Some bites turn red. She is too tired to care. She drifts in and out of sleep. Never fully gone, never fully awake. And in the dark, the jungle sings, a low chorus of croaks, clicks, chirps, hisses, screeches, and distant, echoing howls. It is not comforting. It is not terrifying. It just is, a constant reminder. She is in a living world now, a world with rules, a world without mercy, a world she knows, just barely enough to survive. When morning comes, it comes like a slow reveal. The green returns, the insects calm, and Julianne rises, aching, hungry, dizzy, but alive. Again. By the second day, Julian begins to hope. Not for rescue, not yet, but for discovery. A part of her still believes that someone must be close. A rescue team, a group of survivors, a signal, a sound, a sign, something. She moves along the stream slowly, her body stiffer now than the day before. The bruises on her arms have deepened to dark purple. The pain in her collarbone is constant, a sharp reminder of how fragile her body really is. She is careful not to trip, not to slip. She knows a twisted ankle here could mean death. But what Julianne fears most now, more than jaguars, more than snakes, is that she is alone. Completely. She calls out again. Hello. Nothing. Just the birds above. Can anyone hear me? Silence. Even the insects seem to pause for just a moment, then resume. She follows the stream for hours, resting only when the light fades or the pain becomes unbearable. And then she sees something, not a person, not a building, but something man-made, a piece of wreckage. It's part of the airplane fuselage, bent, torn, blackened by fire. She stares at it, frozen. Then she walks closer. It's real. This is not a dream. She had been on that plane. This is proof, in metal and ash, that it truly happened. Near the wreckage, she finds something else. 3 seats, still attached together, just like hers. And in them, bodies. They are passengers. A man, a woman, a child. She doesn't recognize them. They are too damaged, too still. Julianne turns away. Her hands are shaking. Her breathing becomes shallow. She had hoped to find people, but not like this. Still, something inside her, perhaps survival instinct, perhaps the voice of science from her parents, keeps her from falling apart. She stares at the trees, inhales slowly, and lets the feeling pass through her. She cannot stay here. She cannot bury them. She can only keep moving. As she walks away, she whispers quietly, I'm sorry. It's all she can offer. She continues down the stream, now more alert than ever. The jungle feels different now, like it's watching her more closely. She notices every movement, every shift of shadow. She begins to understand the patterns of the forest more deeply, where ants march in lines, where birds gather, where the frogs disappear before rain. At times she feels dizzy. Her hunger is growing stronger. She finds a small fruit. She remembers it from Panguana. It's safe, edible. She eats slowly, carefully, savoring even the sourness. It's the first food she's had in 2 days. She drinks from the stream again, cupping the water in her hands. She thinks of her father, of how he used to filter water with his shirt. She tries it, slowly pouring water through a corner of her torn dress. It helps a little. As night falls again, Julianne finds another small clearing. She's learning how to survive. She avoids sleeping near termite mounds. She knows which trees host aggressive ants. She tries to keep her injured shoulder elevated as she rests. She drifts into a kind of half-sleep, her body resting, but her mind still alert. In the distance, she hears howler monkeys. Not close, but loud. Deep, guttural, echoing. She knows they're not dangerous, not directly, but they mean larger predators may be nearby. Jaguars, ocelots, wild boars. She doesn't move, just breathes, and waits until the sounds pass. On the third day, she finds more wreckage. Another wing, a section of flooring, a suitcase, burst open. Inside, a shoe, a shirt, a toothbrush. She does not recognize them either. No people, only objects, echoes of lives cut short. And through it all, the same question repeats in her mind. Am I the only one? That possibility begins to root itself deeper inside her now. A quiet truth. Terrifying, but necessary. If she is the only one, then rescue may never come. She must not wait. She must walk, follow the water, find the river, find people. And so she walks, not with fear, but with quiet certainty. The jungle is no longer unfamiliar. It is her world now, and every step forward is a step away from the sky. The days begin to blur. The jungle has no calendar. The sun is filtered through endless layers of leaves. Time becomes a suggestion, not a truth. Julianne walks, rests, walks again. She counts the mornings only by how many times she has opened her eyes to light. By now, it is the 4th day, maybe the 5th. She isn't sure anymore. Her body has grown weaker. Each step is a calculation. Her left foot, bare, is blistered and bleeding. Her broken collarbone still burns with pain when she breathes too deep. She has not eaten anything substantial in days. She finds fruits here and there, small, tart, barely enough to fill her palm. But she's careful. Her mother had taught her. In the jungle, what looks beautiful often hides poison. So she tests everything with slow bites, watches for reactions, waits. The hunger is constant. A dull, gnawing emptiness that sits in her stomach and whispers at night. She tries to silence it with water. It works for a while. Her sleep grows thinner. She begins to drift in and out of waking dreams. Strange thoughts slip into her mind, fragments of memory mixed with imagination. She sees her father, standing by the riverbank, calling her name. She hears her mother's voice, gentle, clear, telling her it's time to come home. Sometimes she follows these voices. Sometimes they vanish before she can take 2 steps. She realizes what's happening. She's hallucinating. But even in this haze, a part of her remains sharp, the part that grew up in Panguana, the part that knows how to survive. She speaks out loud to herself to stay grounded. Stay awake, Julianne. You know this forest. You know what's real. She keeps walking. The stream she's following begins to widen. The trickle has become a slow flow. It winds around moss-covered rocks. Small fish dart beneath the surface. Tiny frogs leap from stone to leaf. It's a good sign. A wider stream means she's getting closer to a river. And rivers, she remembers, always lead somewhere. But the terrain is changing. The jungle becomes denser. Some parts are nearly impassable. She has to crawl beneath roots, climb over fallen trunks, wade through patches of mud that suck at her ankles like hands. At one point, she slips. She falls into a shallow ravine, landing hard on her side. Pain shoots through her arm, and for a moment, everything goes black again. Her mouth is dry. Her limbs are shaking. She doesn't know how long she's been unconscious. She lies still and cries. Quiet tears. No sobbing. No outburst. Just a soft release, like the forest mist that clings to leaves in the morning. She lets herself feel the grief now, for her mother, for the others, for the plain and the people she'll never see again. For herself, 17, alone, in a green world too large for any one girl. But even this doesn't last long. Julianne wipes her face, pulls herself up, and stands. She's beginning to understand that survival is not only physical, it's emotional, mental, spiritual. You don't survive by being strong every minute. You survive by continuing after you feel weak. So she continues. On the 6th day, she finds something strange. Floating in the stream, a candy wrapper. It's clean, bright, red and white. She stares at it for a long time. It doesn't belong to the jungle. It came from a human, from someone else. And if it floated downstream, maybe they're still ahead. She picks it up, presses it between her fingers. The smell of sugar is faint, but it's there. A strange sense of joy fills her chest. Not because of the candy itself, but because of what it means. She is not alone. She begins to move faster, with more urgency now. Every bend in the river feels like a promise. She is tired. She is hungry. She is aching. But somewhere ahead, there is something, someone, and maybe, just maybe, rescue. The 7th day begins like the others, with quiet light filtering through thick jungle mist. But there is something different in the air. Julianne feels it. The birds are louder today. The stream runs a little faster, and the wrapper she found yesterday still sits in her pocket. The red and white crinkled, touched 100 times now, like a prayer bead. She moves forward with more speed now. Every bend in the river holds a question. Every sound could be a voice. Every flash of color through the trees might be a house or a boat or a person. But instead, she finds something else. It is late morning when she smells it. Something wrong. Rot. Decay. A smell that does not belong to the clean, wet air of the forest. She stops, listens. Then she sees it. Another section of the plane. This time, the cockpit. It lies at an angle beside the riverbank, covered in vines. Twisted metal. Shattered glass. A tree growing through the side as if claiming it. And inside, the crew, the pilots, still strapped to their seats. They had not burned. They had not been thrown. They had fallen, just like her. But they had not survived. Julian stares at the wreckage. There is something sacred about it, a moment frozen in time. She does not scream. She does not look away. She simply stands still, arms crossed over her chest, breathing shallow. It is strange, she thinks, how death feels here. It is not loud, not terrifying, just still, as if the jungle has accepted them, folded them into itself. She backs away quietly, not out of fear, but out of respect. The silence is different here, heavier, like the air knows. She sits by the river further down and tries to make sense of her emotions. She is closer than ever to rescue. She can feel it. And yet, it feels farther away, too. This isn't a movie. There are no signals in the sky, no helicopters overhead, just wreckage, and water, and trees, and her. She decides to move faster now, not recklessly, but with purpose. She finds a long branch and uses it as a walking stick. It helps steady her on uneven ground. She begins to wade directly in the stream where the banks become too thick with vegetation. The water cools her feet, washes the dried blood from her skin. But she knows creatures live here too. Piranhas, parasites, stingrays. So she watches every step. The jungle opens slightly in some places. Fields of ferns as tall as her shoulders. Soft hills covered in moss. She notices animal tracks in the mud. And human ones. At first she doubts her eyes. But then she sees it again. A barefoot print. Smaller than hers. Fresh. She kneels beside it, presses her fingers into the impression. This is real. She is not alone in this forest. Hello? Nothing. She calls louder. Hello? And this time, a sound, not a voice, but something. Wooden, a knock. A rhythmic creak, like wood against wood. She follows it, heart pounding, legs trembling. She moves through a curtain of vines, and there, in the middle of the river, She sees it. A boat. A real, human-made boat, tied to the roots of a tree. Empty. Still. And behind it, a path. A trail. Leading up a low bank and into the trees. Her breath catches. This is not the jungle anymore. This is the edge of something else. A human place. She steps toward the boat, touches it, runs her hand over the side. The wood is warm in the sun. There are signs of recent use. Footprints in the mud, scraps of paper, an empty gasoline can, and beside the boat, a small hut. Just a shelter, really, made of palm branches and wooden beams. Inside, a tarp, a few tools, and a bottle. She picks it up. It's open. It smells of kerosene, and then she remembers. Her father's voice again, echoing from childhood. Kerosene can clean wounds. It will burn, but it kills infection. Julianne looks at her injuries. Her right arm is covered in maggots, small white larvae that have burrowed into the torn flesh. She hadn't even noticed. Her body had gone numb days ago. She grits her teeth, pours the kerosene onto the wound. The pain is immediate. Fire on her skin. Tears rise to her eyes. Her body shakes, but she holds it. She breathes through it. She knows this is survival. When it's done, she wraps the wound with part of her dress. She stays by the hut that night. It is the first roof over her head in more than a week. She lies on the wooden floor, staring up at the gaps in the palm fronds, and lets the darkness settle around her. The jungle sings. But she is no longer inside it. She is at the edge. And someone will come. She knows it. Morning, the 8th one. Or maybe the 9th. Julianne opens her eyes to the sound of water lapping against the riverbank. It's quieter here. Still. The shelter of the hut has kept the night's cold away. She slept for the first time without fear. Her body still aches, but the wound on her arm looks cleaner now. The maggots gone, the skin pale and raw, but healing. She sits up slowly, drinks from a tin cup she found near the hut, filled from the stream, eats a piece of old fruit she found drying beside the boat. And then, a sound, far off. Voices. At first, she thinks it's another hallucination, a trick of the jungle. But the sound comes again, louder this time. Laughter. Splashing. Julianne stands and limps to the edge of the bank. She sees them. 3 men, walking along the river's curve, carrying tools, a machete, a fuel can. They are barefoot, wearing simple clothes. Fishermen, maybe, or woodcutters. She freezes. Then, without thinking, she stumbles down the bank, waving her arms. Hola, ayuda. She yells in Spanish, the language of the land. The men stop. They stare at her. A blonde, bloodied girl in torn clothes, barefoot with a swollen face and bandaged arm. She must look like a ghost. One of the men whispers something. Another crosses himself. Julianne speaks again. I'm Julianne. The plane. Lanza. It crashed. I fell. I've been walking. The men exchange glances. One of them steps forward slowly, nodding. He speaks softly. You came from the sky? She nods. Yes, the jungle. I survived. They look at her, not with fear now, but awe. Then, without another word, one of them gently takes her hand. Come, we'll help you. She feels her legs weaken with relief. The moment she has waited for over a week, is here. They bring her into the hut, offer her water, wrap her in a dry blanket. One of the men examines her wounds. Another brings her food, rice and cooked fish. She eats slowly. Every bite tastes like life. They ask no questions at first. They simply sit with her, as if sensing that her body has lived through something language cannot explain. Later, one of the men radios the nearest town, tells them what they've found. A girl from the plane, alive. There is silence on the other end, then disbelief, then noise. By the next morning, a small motorboat arrives. 2 more men, supplies, a tarp for shade, a stretcher. They lift Julianne gently into the boat, wrap her in cloth to protect her skin from the sun, and together they begin the journey downriver. The trees pass slowly on either side. The boat hums softly. Julianne lies back, staring up at the canopy, the same one that caught her fall, now watching her escape. She doesn't speak much. There is too much to say, too much she still doesn't understand. Her body is here, but her soul is still among the trees. She hears the men talking in low voices, calling her a miracle. Some say she must be protected by spirits. Others believe it was fate. A few simply call her La Niña del Cielo, the girl from the sky, and Julianne. She just listens and breathes and lets herself believe. It's over. When the boat pulls into the village dock, the world begins to stir. Word spreads faster than the river flows. A girl from the Lanza crash. Alive. People gather. Some stare in silence. Some whisper prayers. Some cross themselves as she passes. The men carry Julianne carefully in a makeshift sling. She is covered in cloth to protect her from the sun. Her eyes are swollen. Her skin is scratched and blistered. But she is sitting upright, breathing, alive. They take her to the nearest medical post, a small wooden building with 2 rooms, a tin roof, and white sheets for walls. A nurse begins to clean her wounds. Another brings broth and warm tea. Then the questions begin. What is your name? How long were you in the jungle? How did you survive? Did anyone else make it? Julianne answers softly. Slowly. My name is Julian Kupke. I was on Lanza Flight 508 with my mother. The plane broke apart in the sky. I don't know how I survived. I think I fell 10,000 feet. I don't remember hitting the ground. I woke up alone. The room goes quiet. She continues, voice low. I walked for days, followed a stream. I found other passengers. None of them survived. I think I'm the only one. There is silence again. Then, a sound she hasn't heard in over a week. A phone rings. By nightfall, the news has traveled beyond the village, to the city, to the capital, to Lima, and then to the world. The miracle girl of the Andes, the one who fell from the sky. Julian Koepke, sole survivor of the Lanza disaster. Radio stations begin to broadcast her name. Newspapers print what little information they have, and around the world, people pause to wonder, to imagine, to ask, how? Doctors arrive by air the next morning. They lift her into a small medical plane, strap her gently in. For the first time in over a week, Juliana feels the thrum of engines again beneath her feet, and for a moment, she is afraid. Not of flying, but of remembering. The plane takes off. She closes her eyes, breathes through the pain. This is not the same flight. This is a return. When they land in Pucallpa, the city where she and her mother had been heading before the crash, a crowd is waiting. Photographers, reporters, officials, doctors in white coats, people with questions in every language. They want to see her, touch her, talk to her. But Julianne is barely awake. The doctors wheel her through the crowd. Cameras flash. Questions are shouted. Julianne, how did you survive? Do you believe it was a miracle? Did your mother survive the fall? Are you afraid of flying now? What do you remember about the moment the plane broke? But Julianne doesn't answer. She is 17, exhausted, alone, and now a symbol. Not just a girl, but a headline, a myth, a survivor. They take her to a hospital, place her in a clean bed, give her real food, IV fluids, bandages, quiet. And then the door opens, and everything stops. A man and a woman enter. They are older, tired, dressed plainly. But when Julianne sees them, she begins to cry. Her father. He crosses the room, kneels beside her, and wraps her in his arms. They do not speak. They simply hold each other. He has waited days for this moment, feared the worst. He had been told no one could have survived. But here she is, his daughter, broken, thin, but alive. The next days blur again. Medical treatment, press conferences, phone calls from Germany, letters from strangers, flowers, gifts, but Julianne feels none of it. Inside, she is still in the jungle, still following the stream, still walking through the green, still listening for her mother's voice. It would take days for them to confirm that Maria Koepke did not survive. Her body was eventually found, still strapped to her seat, still high in the trees. Julianne receives the news in silence. She does not cry again. Not then. There are no tears left, only quiet. And the question that will live in her forever. Why me? Survival is not the end of a story. It is the beginning of a new one. A story with no map, no guide, no clear direction. Julianne lies in the hospital bed, staring at the ceiling. Doctors come and go. Journalists knock on the door. Cameras click outside her window. But inside, there is only stillness. She is 17, but her face has aged. Not in years, but in depth. In silence. Grief does not scream. Not here. It sits like a stone in her chest. Heavy, still, unmoving. She learns the details slowly. The crash occurred on December 24th, 1971. Christmas Eve. The Lanza Lockheed Electra had been struck by lightning. One wing exploded mid-air. The fuselage shattered. It broke apart above the jungle, raining metal and fire. 92 people were on board. Only one survived. Julianne. The newspapers call her the miracle girl, the girl who fell 10,000 feet and lived. But she doesn't feel like a miracle. She feels like an echo, a ghost, someone who should not be here, but is. They ask her to tell her story. She does. Quietly, fact by fact, like a scientist, like her parents would have. But inside, she is still walking, still calling for her mother, still hearing insects hum against her skin. Her father stays by her side. His hands are steady. His voice is low. He does not press her with questions. He simply exists, beside her, like the trees once did. She learns that her mother was found 12 days after the crash. She had survived the fall, but died from her injuries. Alone, waiting, the guilt crushes her. If they had landed closer, if she had woken sooner, if she had looked in a different direction, what if? What if? But she says nothing, because she knows. The jungle does not answer questions. After 2 weeks, she is flown back to Lima. There is a press conference. Flashes, microphones, a wall of faces she does not know. She answers politely. Yes, I was afraid. Yes, I prayed. Yes, I knew how to survive because of my parents. But inside, her voice is small. She doesn't want to be on stage. She wants to be in the forest again, where no one asked her for anything, where silence was not awkward. It was natural. Back in Germany, where her relatives live, people treat her like a wonder. They invite her to speak, to write. to pose for photos, but she declines. Again and again, she doesn't want the world. She wants peace. She returns to school. Her classmates look at her like a myth. Some whisper, others avoid her. She understands. What do you say to someone who has fallen from the sky? Juliane begins to write, but privately. Journals, sketches, dreams. She dreams often of the jungle, of walking barefoot, of frogs and branches and rain on her skin. She does not dream of the crash. She never sees the plane break apart, only the fall, endless, silent, slow, as if the earth was holding her breath. Her grief becomes a part of her, not something she escapes, but something she carries, like a scar, like a memory folded into the body. She does not try to forget. She does not want to, because to forget her mother would be another kind of loss. So she remembers, in small ways, every time she hears thunder, every time she smells wet leaves, every time she walks alone in nature. The world has moved on, but Juliane Koepke has not. She has simply adjusted. Years passed. Juliane Koepke moved on with her life, or tried to. She completed her studies in Germany, away from the noise of headlines. She studied biology, like her parents. Chose the quiet of science over the spotlight of memory. But the past didn't vanish. It waited, in dreams, in quiet mornings, in the way thunder still made her heart stop for a moment, in the scent of wet leaves. The jungle had never left her, and eventually she knew she had to return. Not because she wanted to relive the terror, but because that forest held the pieces of her life that had been scattered. And she needed to gather them. It was 1998, 27 years after the crash, when Juliane flew back to Peru. She was no longer a teenager. She was a grown woman, a scientist, a survivor who had lived quietly for decades, never seeking attention. But this time, she agreed to something different. A documentary crew had reached out. They wanted to tell her story, not as a sensation, but as a human experience. Juliane hesitated. Then she said yes, because part of healing is remembering. She landed in Pucallpa, the same city where she'd been taken after the crash. The trees still lined the edge of the airstrip. The river still moved like a silver snake through the green. But she was different now. She and the crew traveled deep into the jungle, by boat, by foot, retracing her steps as best as possible. She didn't recognize much. The forest had changed. The vegetation had swallowed old paths. But certain feelings returned instantly. The weight of the air, the sounds, the way time disappeared beneath the canopy. She pointed to a stream. Somewhere like this, she said. I followed the water. For days, she was quiet most of the journey, not out of fear, but reverence. This was sacred ground. Eventually, they reached the site where part of the wreckage had once been found. The trees stood tall, unmoved by the years. Julianne stood still. She closed her eyes. The wind moved through the leaves. A bird called in the distance, and for a moment she was 17 again, alone, walking, searching, surviving. She opened her eyes and smiled, not because it was over, but because she had returned, not as a victim, not as a girl from the news, but as herself, as Julianne. The crew filmed quietly. No narration, no dramatic music, only silence and the sound of the forest. Later, she said, "The jungle took everything from me, and yet it gave me back my life." That paradox lived inside her. Grief and gratitude, loss and strength, death and rebirth. The jungle was cruel, but it was also honest, and she had become part of it. After returning to the jungle where she fell, Julianne did not seek cameras again. She did not publish memoirs or stand on stages. She returned instead to the world of insects, trees, and soil, to the quiet patterns of biology, to the rhythm of life as it unfolds slowly, not for audiences, but for itself. She became a scientist, a mammalogist. Her work focused on bats. She would spend nights recording sounds, tracking flight paths, cataloging behaviors. There was a kind of peace in it, in studying creatures that, like her, lived between sky and shadow. She married. She built a home, a life filled with books, field notes, and soft evenings. The jungle never left her. It shaped how she spoke, slowly, deliberately, with pauses between thoughts. It shaped how she walked, light-footed, always listening. And it shaped how she loved, fiercely, but quietly. She never had children. She never needed to build monuments. She had lived through something most could never imagine, and that, she knew, had already left a mark on the world. Occasionally, reporters would still try to reach her. Some wanted new interviews. Others wanted to adapt her life into film or fiction. She declined, not out of bitterness, but because she believed her story was not entertainment. It was something else, a thread in the web of human mystery, a reminder that life is fragile, and that survival is only the first step. Julianne worked in museums, in universities, in field stations. She published papers, not about herself, but about flying mammals, migration, reproduction. People knew her in two ways. Some as the girl who fell from the sky, others simply as Doctor Koepke, and she preferred the second. Her name never stopped appearing in strange places. Books about miracles, documentaries about disasters, studies about human survival. But she never tried to own the narrative. She let the story live. In her final interviews, when asked if she believed in fate, she said, "I believe The jungle has rules. They're not written in books, but they exist. I followed them, and they let me pass. She didn't call herself lucky, or blessed, or chosen. She called herself a scientist and a witness. That was enough. She planted trees, watched bats fly under moonlight, walked through forests with no fear. And in time, the nightmares faded. Not because she forgot, but because she made peace with remembering. The world loves survivors. But more than that, it loves survival stories. Stories that feel impossible. Stories that glow with mystery. Stories that don't belong in the realm of everyday life. Juliane Kupke's story was one of them. A teenage girl falls from the sky, 10,000 feet through a thunderstorm, and walks alone for 11 days in the Amazon rainforest. It sounds like fiction, but it was real, and perhaps that's what made it so difficult for the world to hold. Newspapers exaggerated, magazines added drama, filmmakers proposed scripts filled with things that never happened. Gunfire, snake attacks, hallucinations, lost treasure. Juliane refused them all. She didn't want to be a myth. She wanted to be honest. The truth was already unbelievable enough. It didn't need editing, but the stories continued to spread. In classrooms, in survival books, on websites and podcasts. Each retelling added something. Sometimes she was described as a jungle warrior, sometimes as a terrified child, sometimes as a miracle sent from God, but rarely as what she actually was. A calm, intelligent girl who had learned how to listen to nature. There was no divine sign, no supernatural power, no cinematic explosion. There was only instinct, memory, and determination. Juliane later said, "It wasn't courage, it wasn't strength, it was knowledge and luck. And when luck ran out, it was just not giving up. But the world prefers legends." One article called her the Angel of the Amazon. Another referred to her as the girl who couldn't die. Yet no one saw the invisible weight she carried. The dreams, the guilt, the fear that perhaps surviving made her different. Not special, but strange. Even decades later, people asked, "Do you think you were chosen? Did the jungle protect you? Would you do it again?" And Juliane would smile politely, then lower her eyes, because there was no answer that satisfied both the curious and the quiet. The story, once released into the world, no longer belonged to her. It belonged to headlines, to strangers, to time. But she never tried to take it back. Instead, she lived. She let people say what they needed. And she kept walking, through science, through silence, through forests real and metaphorical. And perhaps that was the most powerful answer of all. It had always been silent that moment. 10,000 feet above the earth. A white dress flapping like a signal. a teenage girl strapped to her seat, spinning weightlessly through clouds. No engine, no screams, just wind and gravity. The fall took less than 2 minutes, but it became forever. Julianne never remembered the impact, and maybe that was a mercy. The jungle caught her. Branches broke her descent. A layer of leaves softened the landing. Her seat, still attached, might have acted as a crude parachute. Or perhaps the physics simply worked in her favor. No one could say exactly why she survived. Not even the scientists. Not even Julianne. The odds were so impossible, so irrational, that for years afterward, people struggled to believe it had really happened. How can someone fall from the sky and live? But Julianne never tried to explain it with numbers. She explained it with stillness, with memory, with quiet. The sky, she once said, is not angry. It is not cruel. It simply lets go. When the lightning struck the plane that Christmas Eve and the fuselage split apart, Julianne's seat was ejected like a seed, spinning, tumbling, falling, and somewhere in that vast blue space between heaven and earth, a story began that would echo for 50 years. A story that didn't need embellishment, didn't need drama, because truth, when it survives, becomes legend on its own. She later described the moment like this: I remember the clouds rushing past me. The wind was deafening. I could see the tops of trees. Then everything went black. That blackness was not an end. It was a beginning. The earth welcomed her, bruised, broken, but alive. And from that place, a place no one was meant to return from, she stood up and walked. There's something about the sky. It takes, it gives, it watches. And even now, Julianne remembers that moment not with terror, but with awe, because in falling she discovered something almost no one else has ever known: what it means to be weightless between two worlds. You've walked far to reach this moment, through clouds, through forest, through silence, and now, as the story comes to rest, it does so gently, like a feather on still water. Julianne Koepke was just 17 when the sky opened, when metal tore, when gravity took her, and when fate, for reasons unknown, chose not to take her life. She should not have survived, and yet she did. Not because she fought with fire, but because she listened to her instincts, to the water, to the trees, and perhaps to her mother's voice still echoing somewhere in the green. Julianne's story is not one of noise. It is not a victory parade. It is not a film script. It is a whisper, a reminder that quiet can be powerful, that fear does not erase knowledge, and that sometimes the strongest step is the one taken alone, barefoot through the unknown. She did not build a brand. She did not chase interviews. She built a life with bats, with books, with forests. She turned pain into purpose, and memory into science. Many who survive disaster become symbols, but Julianne remained real. And maybe that's why her story stays with us, because deep down, we all want to believe that we too could rise after the fall, that we too might listen instead of panic, and that if the world ever drops us into darkness, we could still find our way back to the light. So, if you are listening now, in bed, beneath a quiet ceiling, or on a long night flight, eyes closed against the hum of the engine, or somewhere between sleep and waking, remember this: the girl who fell from the sky walked out of the jungle, not just to tell a story, but to live. And she did, softly, bravely, quietly. Thank you for spending this journey with us. You've been listening to Sleeping Radio, where the world fades and the story remains. Good night.